Towards the end of the parasha, we learned about the animals that are permitted to be eaten and the animals that are prohibited to be eaten, including the dinim of Tumah v'Tahara. In the end, Pasuk Mem Gimel, if you read Pasuk Mem Gimel, it says, Al tishaketzu et nafshotechem bechol hasheretz hashoretz v'lo titame'u bahem v'nitmetem bam. Pasuk Mem Dalet, Ki ani Adonai Elohechem v'yitkadishtem v'yitem kedoshim ki kadosh ani v'lo titame'u et nafshotechem bechol hasheretz haromes ala haaretz. In other words, these two psukim are in contrast of each other, which means that if chas v'shalom a person ingests, brings into his body chol hasheretz hashoretz, which means the foods that are prohibited to be eaten, v'nitmetem bam, then it makes you tameh. That's the simple words. V'nitmetem bam, you become tameh, which doesn't seem so bad, because so what? You become tameh, you go to the mikveh, you become tahor. What are the ramifications of that? Pasuk Mem Dalet, Ki ani Adonai Elohechem v'yitkadishtem v'yitem kedoshim. Then Hashem gives us a commandment. V'yitkadishtem, be pure. V'yitem kedoshim, again, be pure. The Gemara Masechet Chulin explains v'yitkadishtem v'yitem kedoshim. V'yitem is referring to Ma'im Rishonim, which is Netilat Yadayim. V'yitem kedoshim Ma'im Acharonim. In other words, again, bringing purification again to the person's body. He says it twice. V'yitkadishtem v'yitem kedoshim. The Gemara in Masechet Yoma, on Daf Lametet Amud Aleph, says like this: Tana debe Rabbi Yishmael, Avera mitam'et libo shel adam. When a person commits an avera, so it's mitamet libo shel adam. It makes the person tameh. It contaminates himself. It contaminates his heart, not just his body. In other words, it's something that the mikveh, the physical mikveh water, will not be able to purify, because the person's heart becomes tameh. And that's what we saw over here, v'nitmetem. And the Gemara says over there, Masechet Yoma, Al tikre v'nitmetem, ela v'nitamtem ba. In other words, even though the literal translation of the word v'nitmetem means, and you will become tameh, however, the Gemara says, Masechet Yoma, has a deeper understanding. V'nitmetem bam, and you will become stuffed. V'nitamtem, your moach, your lev, will be stuffed from understanding spirituality. You want to sit down and learn Torah, all of a sudden, either you don't understand, it's not having an effect on you, it's not coming into your heart, you don't have a drive for it. Where's that coming from? How come I don't have a chukah? How come I don't have a yearning? How come I don't enjoy it? Because the liv of the Adam is stuffed. How come? Because he ingested inside of his body things that are tameh. And when he ingests into his physical body, it has effect on his heart, has effect on his neshama as well. The words of the Mesilat Yesharim on this aspect is, he writes like this in Perek Yud Aleph, Mesilat Yesharim Perek Yud Aleph. Ma'achalot asurot machnisim tum'a mamash belibo v'nafsho shel adam. Ma'achalot asurot, foods that are prohibited, the Torah says asur to eat. One eats them, what happens is machnisim tum'a mamash belibo. Again, it brings tum'ah, it brings contamination, it contaminates his heart, spiritual aspect of it. U'benafsho shel adam. The person's soul, it taints his soul. Ad shekdushato shel hamakom baruch hu mistaleket mimenu. And the kedusha of Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, leaves him. Chas v'shalom. The Pri Chadash, B'chizkiah di Silva, one of the great poskim, brought in Shulchan Aruch as well as one of the Nosei Kelim. He writes like this in Siman Pe Aleph, which again over there, Siman Pe Aleph in Yoreh De'ah, is regarding Ma'achalot Asurot. And he writes, these are his words, L'fi shebizmanenu, en nizharim me'inyanim elu. In his time already, going back a few centuries, he says, in our times, en nizharim me'inyanim elu, we're not so careful to keep these halachot to the T. Rov habanim yotzim l'tarbut ra'ah. That's why most of the children go off the derech. Why do they go off the derech? They don't have a connection to the Torah. Torah doesn't give them enjoyment. How come? Because what's ingested in them is dvarim asurim. Now it can be physical ingestion, what is coming in because of machalot asurot, or what goes into his eyes as well, goes inside his neshama and taints it, what he thinks about in his mind. But what the Torah is referring to in Mechadesh over here specifically regarding food. It's not the only thing that have a negative effect on the person. But the Pri Chadash is saying that has a tremendous effect on the children of the generation. That's why they rather the outside. They have more enjoyment from the outside. Gives them more satisfaction. And and it causes brazenness and chutzpah because of what goes inside. And that's because of the animals that the Torah prohibits are animals that are not the best of nature. An animal is an animal, but there are different types of animals. And the animals that Hashem created that are more tame, Hashem created animals that are more cruel. When one brings inside his body one that the Torah is osed and prohibits, so he's bringing cruelty into his body. He's bringing azeh panim, azut panim, brazenness and chutzpah into his body. The Gemara Masechet Chagiga relates the story with Acher Elisha ben Avuya. Elisha ben Avuya was the Rebbe of Rabbi Meir, who unfortunately, point in his life, went off the derech. And the Gemara explains a few different reasons why that happened to him. If he was so kadosh and tahor, how could someone of that caliber, of that stature, go and become mamash mumad, go off the derech, mechalel Shabbat, befarhesia, and so on. And one of the things that the Gemara does not mention over there, but Tosfot over there brings in Masechet Chagiga. Tosfot brings, one of the explanations is, at the time that his mother was pregnant with him, she passed by a house of idol worship, Bet Avodah Zarah. She smelled the food over there, and she ate from it. She ate from that food, it went into her body, and because of that, who gets from the food of what the mother eats? The baby. And even from the time that she was pregnant, and she ingested in her own body, but through that it went into Elisha's body at that time, already tainted his neshama from that point. And therefore later on in his life it came out. It came out what was inside of him, bubbling inside of him, from even before he was born. And it had an effect on his spirituality. The Gemara says, Masechet Shabbat. The Gemara says, Masechet Shabbat, that one of the Tanaim, Rabbi Ishmael ben Elisha, Rabbi Ishmael ben Elisha, one of the great Tanaim, he said like this: Chazal were osed, they prohibited a person on Shabbat Kodesh to have hana'ah from Or Hanir. In other words, a person cannot come close to a candle and read a book next to it. Why? The Gemara explains, Shema Yeteh. You might come to tip the candle, and by tipping the candle and bringing the oil closer to the wick, that's an Isur Havara, it's an Av Melacha on Shabbat. And the Isur Havara, if the candle is starting to go down, you might come to tip it. Don't imagine the candles that we have today, it's hard to understand why someone would tip it. But the ways that their candles were made and the types of candle holders that they had, the oil would remove itself slowly as it got eaten up by the wick. And in order to bring the oil closer to the wick at a certain time, when it's starting to flicker and go out, would cause the Isur of Havara, which is an Av Melacha, Isur Skeilah on Shabbat. Rabbi Ishmael heard this halacha, and he says, I'm tzaddik, I'm chassid, I have fear from Shamayim, that's never going to happen to me. Ani ikra velo ateh. I'll read, no problem, I'll read next to the Or Hanir, and Shabbat to Shabbat. I'm not going to tip it, chaz v'shalom, it's not going to happen to me. Gemara says, according to one opinion, hikra v'hita, kara v'hita. He read the hita and he actually tipped. And he says about himself, K'shiyivneh bet HaMikdash, and be Ishmael ben Elisha, he wrote it down, make sure he doesn't forget, that when the Bet HaMikdash is rebuilt, Avi Chatat Shemina, I'm going to bring a Korban Chatat, but a fat one, Korban Chatat, to rectify my sin. So you see, even the Ishmael ben Elisha, he fell. What's that to do with us? Tosfot over there, right over there in Masechet Shabbat, and if you bet him with that. Tosfot says, 1 second, doesn't the Gemara say, Masechet Chulin, that afilu be'emtan shel tzadikim en hakadosh baruch hu mevi takala al yadam. The Gemara says over there that the chamor, the donkey of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, didn't want to eat food that's not mitukan, that's not meusar, that's prohibited to eat, and he's a behemah. The behemah is not chayav in mitzvot, and Hashem didn't bring a takala. The animal didn't eat it, and the animal, so to say, was saved from ingesting this food. So 1 second, if Hashem has a special surveillance and He watches over even the behemot of the tzaddikim, and even the behemot of the righteous, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't let them fall, so to say. So the tzaddikim alachat kal v'chama, kal v'chomer, the tzaddikim Hashem protects. So if that's the case, how come HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't protect Rabbi Ishmael ben Elisha? Rabbi Ishmael ben Elisha, if he protects Hashem, if Hashem protects the chamor, He protects the donkey of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. So shouldn't He, Vadai, Kal V'chomer, protect Rabbi Ishmael ben Elisha from not having to tip and violating the Yisud Midoraita? Yes, inadvertently, it was Bishogeg, but he did it. And he would have to bring a Korban Chatat if the Bet HaMikdash was Kayam. And Tosfot says that there's a difference between external actions that happen from the external, like Chilul Shabbat, which would happen with the hand, for example, that he tipped the candle, to Ma'achalot Asurot. When it comes into ingesting, over there's a special Hashgacha from Shamayim. Why? Because that's the lesson over here. That we see how it has an effect, a negative effect on the person when he ingests something that's tameh, chaz v'shalom, that's almost unrectifiable. Look at Elisha Acher, Elisha ben Avuya. He was such a tzaddik during his life. He was such a great Talmid Chacham, and still what he ingested in his body had an effect on him later on. It's almost something that cannot almost be rectified in a way. It becomes part of the blood and part of the nefesh of the person. It's very, very difficult to undo. When it comes to external isur, tipping of a candle, it's up to you. You have to take care of yourself. You know about Shabbat. You make sure you have the right Yirat Shamayim, and you put it to your mind not to do it, and you'll have Siyata D'Shmaya. But the extra hashgacha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is worried for a person not to come close to, and the greatest tzaddikim he'll protect is when it comes to Ma'achalot Asur, making sure that what the person ingests is 100% Kadosh V'Tahor. Be'ezat Hashem, we should all be zocheh to be Kedoshim V'Tahorim, to separate ourselves from all the Tum'ah, whether it's the external Tum'ah that we ingest through our eyes or through our mouths, what we think about. And Be'ezat Hashem will be zocheh to Kedusha V'Tahara, V'yitem Kedoshim, Ki Kadosh Ani, and will be zocheh to tremendous Siyata D'Shmaya Be'ezat Hashem. Shabbat Shalom.
You